Good morning, and welcome to Coffee and Friends. Welcome back to those that have been here before, and welcome to those who are here for the first time. Glad that you were brave enough to come out, knowing that it's going to be quite warm later on, but I think the air cons are on and we're keeping cool. Janet's been doing her usual stalking on the internet and trying to find out all of Vince's biggest and darkest secrets, so I'm going to share those with you today. For the price of a brown paper envelope, I can probably share some things later on. So this is what Janet has written. We are very fortunate. We are very fortunate to have Vince Pietro as our guest speaker at Coffee and Friends today. Vince served in the Royal Australian Navy for 40 years and has flown 5,000 hours in helicopters and aeroplanes. You might need to do some fact checking on this one. His naval career included leadership roles in aviation, squadron, shore and joint commands, professional military education, diplomacy, safety and risk management and system safety. Vince was appointed a member of the Order of Australia in the Queen's Birthday Honours List in June 2016 for exceptional service as Commander Fleet Air Arm from January 2013 to January 2016 and as Australia's Naval Attaché to the United States from June 2007 until June 2010. Overqualified, I'd say. In retirement, Vince still needed adventure and also a chance to make a difference. And this chance came in the form of the Outback Air Race. Vince and co-pilot Light Holt recently participated in the Outback Air Race, raising funds for the Royal Flying Doctor Service. The race started at Uluru and finished at Carnarvon in Western Australia, covering 3,800 kilometres. There were 45 planes in this time trial, which takes place every 2 years. Vince will tell us about Team Charlie Alpha Foxtrot and the single-engine Piper Cherokee PA-28, which carried them on their adventure. The funds that were raised will help the valuable work of the RFPS, who provide access to skilled doctors and nurses in remote areas of the country. The fundraising target was $20,000, and we might find out if you made it or not. And the other thing, when I first heard the name, I thought that rings a bell, and I just confirmed with Vince that he worked for the council after the 2019 25s in the bushfire recovery and did some great work there.
Thanks, mate.
Let's welcome Vince to Pietro.
Okay, can people hear me okay? Okay, so what we're going to do today is we'll have a bit of a conversation rather than a lecture, if that suits. What I've got is sort of split up into four areas, four sections, and we'll start off with preparations. Then we'll talk about getting there because it was a long way to the start. Then we'll talk about the race, and then we'll talk about getting back because that was an even longer way home. But I've got a little map up there on the screen, and it's duplicated down here on this corkboard with a little piece of string. But effectively, we flew just under 6,000 miles, and I'll start with the bottom line and bring it up to the front. We flew just under 6,000 miles. We took off on Sunday the 17th and returned of August and returned on Sunday the 14th of September. So it was exactly 4 weeks that we were away. The machine flew 64 and a half hours. It missed a couple of little beats, which we'll talk about during the race segment, but none of them were too drastic. And also we used about 2,250 litres of fuel. Getting home, we'll talk about in more detail, but that was the biggest challenge because we were trying to beat a couple of cold fronts because the machine is a 1968 Piper Cherokee. It's steam driven, it works without missing a beat, but it's not instrument capable and we couldn't really afford to be stuck in any weather to get home. Anyhow, so what we'll do is just talk about the preparations first. This all started because a mate of mine called Ian Warburton, who was the race manager of this last event. Okay, John. Ian Warburton and I bumped into each other at Griffith when Sandy and I were on our way up to Tilpa in northwestern New South Wales, and he was on his way back from Darwin. And I parked the aircraft into the parking area and I tied it all up, and this other Cherokee taxied up to the fuel bowers, and I hadn't seen Ian Warburton for, I don't know, 25 years. And as I was up on the wing of my aircraft, he walks over with his hat on and his glasses and says, "Do you know what you're doing?" And I didn't recognise it, I thought I did, but what have I missed? And he took up his hat and glasses and, "Oh, how are you, mate?" And he said, "Do the Outback Air Race." And that was in August 2023. And from then on, I've been preparing and starting to get ready for this event. So we went through a number of phases. The first thing we needed was a reasonable team. I first employed the services of my brother, who was a 30-year veteran of Navy and a test pilot. And I said, we were going to do this together and see if our relationship survives. And then unfortunately, Tony ended up with a serious couple of back issues, which ended up in laminectomies, and I'm just so grateful we didn't raise 30 grand for the Royal Flying Doctors to have to charge him 35 to get him back. So Tony unfortunately couldn't do it, and then worked down really quite a long list of people. I thought, well, this guy I like it, this guy I like this. And eventually, I heard or saw on LinkedIn an old student of mine from RAF Pierce in 1991, Lyle Holt, was leading the Defence Force because he went from Navy to Air Force and flew in F-111s as a navigator. And he was leading the Defence Force to start a career as a photographer. And I thought, hey, a navigator can take pictures. That's the bloke. So I got in touch with him and I said, "Can I take you away from your family for 6 weeks? And we're going to go and do this." And he said, I'll have to take a bit of time to talk to the spouse about that because it's going to take some convincing. I promised her I'm not going to deploy again. And I said, "Well, you won't be leaving Australia and you're in good hands." So he very graciously said, "Yeah, I'd love to." And so I had my crew. Then we had to get a logo. Got a lovely young girl in North Nowra who was a local graphic artist. And what we did was we stylised the side markings, the side flashes of the aircraft, and made that Team Charlie Alpha Foxtrot. And that was the name of the team. The Charlie A Foxtrot idea came from my daughter Louisa in Melbourne. She said, "Why don't you just give the aircraft its own name instead of all the other teams which had all sorts of things like Whiskey on the Rocks and all sorts of ridiculous names." But so yeah, Charlie A Foxtrot it was. Then we had to go about the business of getting so we looked half professional. What I'm wearing today is exactly what I wore around the race in every regard, from privates to socks to shirt and trousers to the hat, even the watch, because my real watch broke down the week before we left, so the thing that had been on my wrist for 25 years couldn't come with me. But that's okay, we don't believe in omens. Then we started getting together things like survival kits, and I brought along a survival kit here. And the reason I've done that is because today we're about to go to severe fire warning. And the things that are in this box, all of a sudden I realised, actually, that's not a bad little kit to have in the boot of your car. But we can talk about that and we can come up and have a play with all sorts of things we've got. But really incredible things like a little radio, which you can hand crank. It's got a USB port on the bottom, a torch. It receives AM, FM and shortwave. And you can literally charge it with the sun as well, because it's got a solar panel. That's $20. And the reason that was important is because we were about to fly, coincidentally, pretty well over where the Cafe Royal incident happened for Charles Kingsford Smith. Now, if he had one of these, he could have saved an awful lot of his signalling survival gear until he knew where they were looking. And the reason this is important is because as the radio is talking about they're looking for you and where you might be, you can actually follow it. And if they're not looking in your area, keep your powder dry until they are. Just a natural thought. Something like this is made in Australia in Victoria. It's a little handheld EPIRB, emergency locator beacon. They're $320. And when I was loading these things up with both of our details, I literally had both of them in my hand, like that, to do the test. And on the instructions it says, don't worry about doing the test, it doesn't go anywhere. So I did the test, and within 60 seconds, my mobile phone rang and said, "Oh, hi, it's Fiona from AMSA here. We've just had 2 emergency locator beacons go off in your area and had 3 airborne confirmations. Are you okay?" And I said, "Well, thank you very much for asking," and yes, I think I am. It seems a lot of people keep asking me if I'm alright, if I know what I'm doing. And I just said to her, "This is supposed to be test only, you're not supposed to hear that." And she goes, "Well, why not? Let me help you load it up." And it was as good as that. But these things are $300 and the battery lasts till 2032. So if you're looking for a good Christmas gift idea, you get them at ARB, you know, the off-road specialists, all-wheel drive shops. They're really good value. So anyway, we put together a really good little survival kit, and the intention of that, and as you see, it's all been unused, which is just as well. You don't buy these things to use them. But that whole box was only $150 all up, with things like emergency drinking straws. You put that into the dirtiest water you can find, and stuff on one end of it, and it comes out drinkable. They're about $6. Anyway, on with the preparations, survival kit, we made some emergency rations, we made some toolkits. We couldn't do much out in the field, and some of the tools I needed, I just didn't have, because they were mostly not metric tools. And I went home to my dad's old toolbox, and Dad died in 1971, and he used to own a semi-trailer in 1959, and there was this box of bits which I just can't bring myself to throw away. And I needed a specific size socket, and you'll see a photo of it on the slideshow. And I went into that box and said, I wonder if there's one in there. And I opened the box, and there it was, sitting right on the top. And when we did have a little hiccup at Catherine, the first tool I needed was that socket. And I thought, yeah, okay, thanks Dad, I'm glad I didn't throw it away. Other things we had to prepare for, we had to make the maps. So this is what's called a strip map. And on that table, you can get around that whole route that I've just described, or that I'm about to describe, and I've done sections by leg for each of those sectors in 20-mile intervals. And why is that important? It's because yes, we had electronics and we had digital, we had GPS, but nothing beats a map in your hand. Look out the window, hey, that doesn't look right to me. And we'll talk about that a bit more in a moment. We did have our iPad, which was fitted with a software package called Oz Runways, which is a moving map. It didn't let us down all the way around. You don't need internet to use it. You just need a GPS signal, and that worked. So that was good. I also, just for stamps, took along a little practice. One of the earliest Garmin's. This is about a 25-year-old kit. This kit is a Garmin 296, and it turned out to be really effective, because even though the information on it in terms of airspace and stuff you might need to keep you out of any sort of legal trouble wasn't all that accurate. The point-to-point navigation of this thing is fantastic, because it tells you how many satellites it's tracking, so you've got a real verification of what you're looking at. So that was worth keeping too, because I think you only find these in the tip now. So the preparations pretty well continued alongside the fundraising, which we started in earnest. And the fundraising is what I believe the whole exercise was about. And you probably can't see that, but we had $20,000 as our first target. By the end of the race, we were, I think it was $160 short of $45,000. So that was Team Charlie Acosta's contribution. The whole race hoped to raise $750,000, and the 40 aircraft raised $1,003,126.19. So it was a really worthwhile effort, because one of the things we did learn, and I'll talk about that in one of the sections, is what the RFDS actually does and how it does it. It's mind-snappingly, amazingly good. Every Australian should really do some reading and understand what it's about, because it's an amazing service. So we started the fundraising, and we did all sorts of things. Like we had a terrific day up at Bangalore Villas, where people in the audience here were foolish enough to buy a flight in the aircraft, which I then took them on, and you'll see their photo in this as well. But we also had an aviation trivia night at one of the local breweries. That raised a bit of money. At the Granara Golf Club, I stood up and just gave them a 7-minute spiel, said, this is what we're trying to do, this is what we're going to do it in. I held up this model and I said, this is what we're going to do it in. And one of the people looked very, very upset and concerned, and I said, no, this is just a model of it, there's a real one. And that night, we walked out of the Granara Golf Club on a Friday trivia night with $3,200. So the generosity of people when you actually give them a bit of an explanation of what you're trying to do, and make no mistake, this was I've done 40 or 50 years in the cockpit. This was probably the hardest flying I've ever had to do, for all sorts of reasons. The things I've taken for granted my whole life. Whenever I've walked out to an aeroplane in naval uniform, it's been clean, ready to go, and people like Lieutenant Commander Cook on the squadron would make sure the thing was always up and running and ready to go. We just took it for granted. But when you've got to do it all yourself, and you're doing it in the outback in searing bloody heat, and then you get airborne into incredible levels of turbulence in something that light, it's pretty challenging. But it was worth it. Anyway, what else did we do? that's about it for now. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to show you a little way we'll do this. I'll do a little spiel up front, and then we'll run a little slideshow for a couple of minutes. And if there's anything worth pointing out, I'll just point it out. But just have a look at the pictures, and hopefully some of the things I've spoken about will just pop out at you. One thing I didn't mention is Kenny the kite. So before we went on this trip, there was a beautiful day up at Haas to go and have a look at the Charles Kingsford Smith Southern Cross replica. And we were given a brief about the engineering work that we needed getting it up and running and that sort of stuff. And I walked out of the gift shop there and I thought, oh, there's a kite. I'll send that to the kids in Perth because I've got 2 grandkids in Western Australia. So I spent $10 and bought this Hargraves box kite. And I couldn't find a tube big enough to send it. And this was back in, I don't know, June. And I thought, I know, I'll take it to them. I'll deliver it airmail in the back of Charlie. And so what you'll see on this slideshow throughout the event is Idiot here standing there with a $10 kite. And I prepared a little album for the kids at the end of the race and said, this is Kenny's journey to you. I hope you enjoy it. The kids love it. Apparently they've had the book read to them as a bedtime story about 4 nights in a row because they just love Kenny the kite. And now they know where it's from and where it's been. It kind of makes it a little bit more special. But that was one of the preparations, just little things that are a bit crazy. Before I go into the slides, the people that supported us, amazing. We had 3 fantastic sponsors in the local area. Silo's Estate, Opstar, and gotta walk through the picture. Here we go. Opstar. Oh, and GDS Space Grid. They make purification water systems. Talk a bit more about that later. We also had Bangalore Villas. Michelle has been terrific and generous. She's running a lunch for us on the 31st of this month for a debrief just like this. We also had Chance and Beck's Brekkie Show on Triple U. They followed us and we had conversations with them all the way around Australia. We also had the local North Narrow Brewery, South Easters Brewery. They helped us with a little bit of funding. And those companies with fleet helicopters up in Armidale, they actually provided about $16,500 towards this effort for us to be able to do it, because it was quite a significant sum of money to do. But with their help, it was certainly a lot less dramatic than it would have been otherwise on the family balance. But the other thing that we really enjoyed was people like Silo's Estate came up with donations in kind. So Raj gave us 6 dozen bottles of wine, which he bottled specifically for us, put a Charlie A. Foxtrot label on it, and gave it to us. And I thought, oh, okay, towards the effort. Just the generosity of people is fantastic. And I just wish we could hear a bit more about that than what I'm hearing mostly on the news every night. Okay, so let's just have a little go. I'll take a break now, get myself a glass of water, and I'll just put up the first little group, which is called Preps. So that was meeting Warbow in Griffith, and the reason we're pointing at the call sign of the aircraft is because it's Charlie Alpha Foxtrot, which also stands for Chief of Air Force. They didn't get everything. That's Lockie McCarthy Oslo. He owns Fleet Helicopters in Armidale. Terrific sponsor for us. That's Karina, who runs the Neck of the Woods Cafe up in North Narra. She was a terrific sponsor as well. This is the aircraft negative maintenance. We had to take the whole of the wing walk off to re-skin it because it had some serious cracking since 1968. And the surface of the old wing turned into that lead sign on this thing here. Someone, local artist Judy Panucci, made a sconce out of it. It's back to it. Looks fantastic. That's Marty Mikosh. He used to own this aircraft. He knows it inside out. We had to take the petrol tanks off. We had to lift the whole wing panel off. And that's the new panel on. And this was all part of the preparation. I'll tell you, the talent in some of the folks around the shoulder area is quite something. And that's the new panel. And it's that black strip there. You walk up that to get into the aircraft. This is the day at Haas with Southern Cross. might just speed this up a little bit. Yeah, beg your pardon, it's on the slowest possible speed. Yeah. That's better. This is just some of the gear we're going to use. We'll talk about that in a moment. There's the wine, the caps, the mugs, fleet helicopters, and GPS Opstar on the side of the tarmac here in Nowra. That's me with a metal ruler measuring out the side of the aeroplane to put the stickers on. And this is the day we went flying with Joan and her friends, having very generously bought a ride in the machine to help us with the fundraising. And this was Michelle Bishop's day up at Bandalay. There's Michelle on my right Sandy. That's Lyle on the right, who's a very trusty, very, very good navigator and friend throughout. There's the crew. We went down and had a look at Castle Rock and Pigeon House. That's proof that we got back. Number of landings equals number of takeoffs. That's the new shirt, tried on for size. This is a lovely girl called Tara from John Hill Signs in Bulgaria. And she did all the decals and putting the logos on the machine. Terrific young kid, really good. So there was an awful lot in it. We had to get, that's my daughter Louisa. I couldn't believe on my 66th birthday to taking Louisa for a ride in our aircraft. Trying the new gear, getting the panel ready for making a bigger panel. All the strip maps, the clothing, the survival kit, the merch, the toolkit, and the inspiration for it all was the maps that we used to use when I was on pilot's course in 1976. I thought, let's do it all back to basics and forget the electronics. Got an entry medical in time, which was good, and got an identification card from Air Services as well, which was good. Then Lyle and I flew up to Armadale. We met with folks, including Thomas Dansville, who some in this room might know. There's Lyle and I coming back. There's Dad's spanner and his socket. That's the aircraft sitting on the tarmac at now, ready to go on Saturday the 16th of August. Okay. So now, talk about getting there. The first leg was pretty straightforward. We took off out of Nowra at about 11 o'clock, or 10 o'clock, sorry, on Sunday the 17th of August. And the first leg was to Griffith, landed on Griffith, took some fuel, reflight planned, and then Griffith to Broken Hill, where we were going to spend 2 nights. And we were just doing a lot of shakedown during that time. We were getting ready with the equipment we had, because the cockpit had to be certainly very, very specifically prepared so that we could have our iPad on display. We could have the 296 on the yoke in front of me so I could use point-to-point nav if I needed it. We had the maps ready to go and we were working out our cockpit disciplines, because I'd never flown with Lyle other than to Armadale to visit Fleet Helicopters as a sponsor. So we were just getting used to each other and how each of us think and work, because that's a big part of, I think, a good team effort in the machine. Excuse me. Ridiculous ringtone. Okay. So then we took off largely without incident. Win Television, was on the tarmac to say bye-bye, and that was fantastic. My brother and his wife came from Canberra, and we had a little group of folks to farewell us on the day. The trip out was largely unremarkable insofar as that there was nothing to report that went wrong. But what we clearly started to see was that the scenery was going to be something that even an average lens was going to be difficult to capture. As we flew over the Menindee Lakes, there was an extraordinary rainstorm coming straight at us, and we flew around it, which was no problem at all. And we had the maps and we had the GPS to help us. And then we went into Broken Hill. And as we landed at Broken Hill, literally about 20-30 minutes later, what was the front end of that rainstorm actually started hitting Broken Hill. If we'd been literally an hour later, we'd have been in all sorts of bother trying to get in, because the crosswinds were extraordinary. But that was about it. So we'll just have a look at how we got to the start point. Oh, and then from Broken Hill, after 2 nights there, we then tracked across to William Creek. And we stopped in William Creek for 2 nights as well, and we started gathering with a lot of the other racers. One of the things that we flew over was Mariman. Has anybody heard of this? Maori man. You'll see it. It's a ground carving of an Aboriginal warrior. It's quite large. It's about, I suppose it's about 2 kilometres wide and about 4 kilometres high. Put there in the late 90s, or late 80s, no one knows by whom, but it's clearly there, and it's right on a little bit further south on the Maori family property, the Maori Downs, and it's just south of Lake Eyre South. But that's quite a spectacular site. And then we landed at William Creek, met with some of our folks. And then the other thing we did was, while we're at William Creek for a day, is we went and had a look at the Painted Desert and the Prominent Hill Mine, which is an extraordinary hole in the ground. It's copper and gold, BHP owned. And when you see the pictures, you'll see what I mean. It's the largest hole on the planet, deepest. And when you're flying over it, I've never had vertigo, but the plane closed that day. I thought, Jesus, look at that. And Lyle was in the back seat with his camera and he was saying, can we get wings level again? But it was quite deep. And when you see the photos, either side of the hole, I'll point them out, you'll see these mounds, these black mounds, and each of them looks like a little cone, and these mounds are made up of little cones. Each of those cones is 220 tonnes of dirt that has come out of the hole, and they literally lay them in sequence and then just fill in the gaps. And you'll see the amount of dirt that's sitting outside this hole to prove that it's pretty deep. The other thing, it's also all mechanised, so these trucks go down and do their job and come back up. And some bloke sitting in air-conditioned comfort having a cup of tea, making sure it all happens. But it's an amazing site. Anyway, from there we then landed back at William Creek, and then the next day we took off from William Creek, and we were about 6 of us in about 15 minutes apart, and we were going to go via a place called Cadney Homestead. And at Cadney Homestead we were going to take fuel and then continue on to Yalara, or Ayers Rock Airfield at Uluru. Anyhow, that came unstuck a little bit, and this is probably one of the first little glitches we had. Even though we'd run the Cadney Homestead the night before, and there were 6 of us, so we'd all made our done our checks properly. Confirm you've got 140 litres of avgas. Yes, we do. And then by the time I rang a second time on the day of departure, the lady on the end of the phone got quite upset, and she said, "Well, where were you all coming from?" I said, "Well, we're all doing an outback air race, and we're on our way to Uluru. So can we just confirm you've got fuel?" "Of course I've got fuel. I've got fuel for you." And she also got quite short. I said, "I've passed my details on to your colleague." And she said, "She's not a colleague, she's staff." Ooh, right. Fair enough. So we got all the way to Cadney Homestead. We did a normal joint of the circuit. There was one aircraft parked, which obviously had its fuel. There was another sitting at the Bowser, and we were going to be the third. So we landed on this, and it was my first serious dirt strip landing. Taxied up to where the aircraft were, and the aircraft in front of me, the lady captaining that was a lovely girl called Steph Hume, and she came running up and said, don't stop, they haven't got any fuel. And I was like, okay, it's going to be sporting. And so when we shut down, had to shut down anyway, the bloke who was there running the pump on his quad bike, he said, "I better get out of here because you guys are all going to get pretty upset with me." And that was it. So one person had refueled successfully, and they came out of the restaurant licking an ice cream while we were standing there saying, "What are we going to do for petrol?" And so Lyle and I did our calculations. We definitely did not want to go back to Coober Pedy because that would have meant we had a then late afternoon transit back to the north. And late afternoon in that part of the world is bloody rough. So we did our numbers and we said, come on, we've been in tough scrapes on this, how do we do this? And so we worked out the fuel, and we thought, if we trim this thing back right and we get the mixture lean enough, and we keep our speed up, we'll beat the turbulence, which means we'll get even better range. I reckon we'll land with about 49 litres. So okay, let's do that. So we got in the machine, flashed it up, took it off, and I've got a nice little video of the departure, which I can show you towards the end. And off we went, and sure enough, we got to Uluru, and we landed with 48 litres in the aircraft. So, the aircraft burns 40 an hour advertised. We had it down to 30 litres an hour, so we had about an hour and a half of fuel in the tank, which was good. And we pretty well flew the whole trip. Everywhere we went, we don't land with less than 1 hour in the tank, just in case. And we'd also worked out points of safe return, points of no return, and points of safe diversion. So we did the whole thing back to aviation 101 as we learned as midshipmen. It was fantastic fun. Anyway, hopefully the slides will give you a bit of a picture of what that looks like. So that's what we left with. We'd already raised 40,000 at the time of departure. Happy faces in the cockpit early on in the piece, which didn't actually diminish. We ended up being great friends and worked together very well. That's all just to the west of us. That was the rainstorm over Menindee. Rain to the left, clear to the right. Rain to the left, clear to the right. And the colours, I can't describe the colours. So this is safely at Broken Hill. That night we bumped into a really old dear friend, Paul Moggo. That was Lyle practicing on his old job before joining the Navy, which was fixing Telstra phones. Broken Hill pub we stayed at, which was great. And then a visit to the Royal Flying Doctor Service Museum, which was just spectacular. And they treated us like kings. We met them in the pub the night before and said, hey, we're raising money for you blokes, so we have a look. And they took us through the whole of the organisation and how it works with the Broken Hill headquarters. Beautiful machines, PC-12s. And the back of those aeroplanes is extraordinary. The nurses and the nurses' aides and the doctors are just amazing people. They're not earning a fortune by any stretch. And then we went out the back and had a look at how you've got rooms full of things that need replacing, batteries that need charging, drugs that need disposal and updating, and then a room preparing all of that for the next visit of a clinic to a place maybe 2 or 3 weeks forward. The logistics is extraordinary. Broken Hill itself, many of you have probably been there, it's a beautiful place. That's a memorial to the mine disaster, and that's Lyle doing what he did best, which is taking good pictures. Although mine aren't bad either. We had dinner that night with all these folks who were on their way to the Mundi Gundi Festival. And there it is. It's quite a sight. All the caravans around the outside with a big fan and the mosh pit in the middle. Although I don't imagine there was much energetic moshing going on. That's how close we were in the cockpit. Very, very tight. Day 2, or day 3 actually, still smiling. And now on our way towards William Creek. Very shortly you'll see the Murray Man. The salt lakes, you can't describe them really. They're all different. It's all salt, but they're all different. That's this extraordinary rock formation just north of Lake Eyre South, which almost looks like a crater. Yeah, I took a lot of pictures of that. I don't know why, it just caught my imagination. And there's no way to describe it. You can't see it any other way, but at 1,500 feet, it's beautiful. I know many of you probably caravan, but this is quite something. And the striations and the rocks and the holes, which are obviously made by something. There's Murray Man, you see his legs? And here's a big picture of him, there he is. And that's Lake Eyre South, holding a boomerang. There's Kenny the Kite. Stop 1, William Creek. That's the bar at William Creek. I'm sure in there's probably a couple of cans of mine from the days gone by. And we started bumping into people, including Trevor Wright, who owns the place. Lyle in the back seat with his big lens, and then off we went to the Painted Desert. And we're just heading towards it now. And here it comes. This just pops out of red earth. There's no roads through it. It's just amazing. And just beyond that comes Prominent Hill Mine. And it really does look like it's been painted. You'll see a lot of Aboriginal art in that area. it's just very similar colours and textures. There's primordial mine, there's the hole, there's the black bits. That's the hole, they're just 1.4 kilometres down. And they're all the slag heaps, those two big black areas. And they're little cones, 220 tonnes each, 1 truck per load. See the little mounds? That's 1 truck, dumping, going back down. And a creek station and Lake Eyre, which was in full flood. And couldn't capture it, but you can just get a hint of it. It's like a tinge of pink in the distance, gloss white in the middle, and deep turquoise in the south. It's all the same water. It's so fantastic to see. I'm so blessed. There's the jet, having its lead. Coming up on the day of departure. Don't know how they got in there, but it's out of sequence. That's basically cancelling start 2 nights before. And that's why these are Lyle's shots. Which is why I put them in late. Off to William Creek and the big rocket breakout at the front of the pub. All stuff from Woomera that's crashed nearby, and they've gone out and got it and put it in a park. That's the William Creek Hotel, which you'll see on The Last Captain Darwin and other movies. It's very, very famous. This is the first bunch of fellow competitors meeting. That was us getting ready at William Creek, ready to go. And I've got a bit of a video which I can show you in a moment. Then off we went towards Cadney Homestead, landed, no fuel, get back airborne, and kept going up. And this is just literally one of the flash flood waterways between William Creek and Ayers Rock. And there's just these great big channels of colour in amongst the red. And that's also a video which I'll show you in the end. Just these big channels of life where the water, when it does flash flood, just bring everything up and make it green. Look familiar? Here we are getting ready for, and this is now getting ready as we're arriving at Uluru for race start. Road train full of fuel, and we probably took half of that. All the aircraft were parked on dirt just off to one side of the terminal. Day 5, still smiling. And certainly smiling there if you're going to be there. And then we had a couple of really great nights at Uluru, just doing Sounds of Silence, which many of you have probably done. And going back to the aircraft each now and then every now and then just to get the thing ready and put the race sticker on, race 35. Sounds of Silence too with all the other competitors. You can really see why it actually is the heart and soul of our land in the minds and eyes of our traditional owners. It just does look like a bloody great beating heart in the middle of the country. It's beautiful. That's the sticker on. We were Team 35, and from this time on we were Air Race 35 was our call sign with the air traffic control. That was after we put the stickers on, back to the pub for a bit of a meal. And then the next thing here was the final before start dinner. And that's where we sort of declared a whole bunch of stuff. There's all the aircraft ready to go, 40 machines. That's all the participants ready to go for the next day. As I say, 40,400 was 40,004 was what we started the ball rolling with. So, the next bit we're going to talk about is the race itself. So each morning the routine was, every day you were racing, we raced every second day. And it wasn't really a race, it was a time trial. So the way it started was, in the morning you would prepare your nav, and I would use these as my reference. So this, for example, is the strip map from Kununurra to Broome. And we had to guess from Kununurra at the gate out, which is a point on the ground, and you'll see one of these on the video shortly, Could have been an old disused water tank, could have been a fence line, could have been a railway crossing sign, could have been a mast. And what you had to do was you had to plot those points, or what we did was plot them on a paper map, work out the grid reference, and then literally you had to set arrival at that particular gate, fly the route to another gate, which was gate in to the next airfield, and you had to predict how long it was going to take you to do that. So every morning you'd fill out a flight form, and the flight form would say it's going to take us, on one example, 1 hour 37 minutes and 12 seconds at our ground speed. And you'd submit that, and that would go into the computer. You would then be issued with your tracker, and the tracker would sit on the dashboard directly above the instrument panel, and it literally would track exactly where you were based on GPS and time. And then at the end of the day, that goes into the glucometer machine, and the glucometer machine says, yep, they were on time, they were on track, they were on heading, whatever. But here's the rub. The interesting thing is that Lyle and I, Lyle being the next one, the F1 navigator and very careful with what he bombs, we would fly over every gate, and I would gently bank to the right, and then wing over to the left, so that he could lean out the left-hand side and take a picture of the target. So we could prove where we were. Every one. 34 of them. The interesting thing is if you're flying one of these things and just using GPS positions, so going point to point, that is far more accurate, according to the tracker, than is seeing the target and literally flying over and taking a picture of it. The reason that's relevant is because we ended up 29th out of 40 in the competition, but we were the only ones that saw every target. One of the guys that won it, they spent most of their time at about 9 or 9,500 feet, and they were literally flying very accurate navigation, point to point, using GPS, and then coupling that into their their autopilot with the time to run. And so the machine was doing an awful lot of work for them. We were at 1,500 feet, bouncing like corks in a bottle. No autopilot. All I had was a trim wheel, which was an old Renault door handle, and everything else was literally mandronic. We were using charts, Jefferson computer, and a stopwatch, and we had the time of our lives. It was a real challenge. It was literally flying point to point when you could see it, then trying to track between that point to the next point within a time interval that you'd already predicted before you took off, and then getting there, then doing the join for the next airfield and so on and so forth. Our best time was 2 seconds late. Our worst time was 9 seconds early because we misidentified that, oh, damn it, and otherwise we could have done a little bit of slowing down, but we didn't. Having said that, I thought for a couple of smelly old pensioners that wasn't bad. But yeah, the new stuff, there's no doubt, new electronics and avionics are just extraordinary. They can achieve all sorts of things, which worries me a little bit because it's kind of, it's a sad thing to think that a lot of people in the cockpits, in their 30s, late 20s, probably wouldn't know what any of this stuff was. And I kind of find that a bit sad because all you're doing is flying a blue line. Yes, which way is north? Well, 12, that way. It's just probably old dinosaurs talking. Anyway. So that was the routine. And we get airborne, you then call your departure call out of an airfield, make your way to gate out, call gate out, 3,500 feet, and just stay at that height, and then track towards gate in, which might have been, in some cases, an hour and a half away, or just under 2 hours away in one case between Kununurra and Port Hedland. And then when you get to gate in, you declare gate in, 3,500, time now, and then airfield for 7 minutes, and then make your way to the airfield and land. And we were split into 2 groups, fast and slow. We were about halfway through the slow group because we would cruise that thing at 105 knots. But the real challenge was that when you actually got airborne in that part of Australia, the rising air off the dirt generates the most amazing thermal activity. At one point, we'll never forget it, it was just outside Tennant Creek, and we climbed out, flew at 1,500, and at one point we flew over a salt flat, and the aircraft started looking at the vertical speed indicator, 1,400, 1,500 feet per minute rate of climb. Wow. And then I started accelerating. I thought, well, I haven't changed the attitude, so this thing's pushing me up and forward. So I had the power right back at idle, and I was still going up at 1,400 feet per minute, and I couldn't get the speed below 120 knots. Lyle sits in the right-hand seat and says, oh, do you reckon you could work on that 105 ground speed a bit more? And I looked at him and said, I'm just a passenger in this at the moment. I had no idea what's happening, and this thing's taking off. We're off to Mars. But it was amazing, and then as you come out the other side of it, quite bumpy, and the vibration and the turbulence was exciting. Gripping stuff. I did have madness ideas of having my bride with me at one point. At some points during the legs, I thought, geez, oh, that's Andy's not in the aeroplane. She wouldn't be enjoying this. But we love it. It's just fantastic. So then we would, that's how we do each day. And the race itself was from Yalara to Alice Springs to Tennant Creek to Daly Waters to Catherine to Kununurra to Broome to Port Hedland to Onslow to Exmouth down to Carnarvon, and that was race finish. It was grueling. It was good fun, but grueling. Realised I'm probably not quite as young as I thought I was, but that's okay. Age and treachery beats youthful exuberance every time. But it was really an exciting thing to do for a number of reasons. Also the people we met. For example, flying into Tennant Creek, we met the mayor who was very interested in space trip. And his name is Sid Vatashi. I think he's Sri Lankan. Been in Australia for about 10 years, and he was the mayor of Tennant Creek. There's no one else wanted to put their hand up. And he said, oh yeah, I'll do it. And this guy's doing extraordinary stuff. Young bloke. And he said, tell me about Space Trip. And I said, well, Space Trip is a company in Nowra called Global Defence Solutions that works out of South Nowra. And they import this machine that literally is a demountable toilet and shower block, which they take out of the field. They brought it to Australia from New Zealand and Australian Defence Force. And you have your shower and go to the bathroom, and clean water comes out the other side, and you can drink it. And I said, why are you interested in Space Trip? He said, because I've got a real problem out here. He said, we've got an average life expectancy, particularly in the Indigenous communities, of about 40 years. And I know the instant reaction is, oh, because that's because they, grog and stuff. It's not that at all. It's because they've been grown up to drink bore water. So it's heavily mineralised and heavily salinated. They can clear some of it, but not all of it, and that wrecks their kidneys. So he was saying to me that we need renal machines out here, but we can't get them because we haven't got the water clean enough to run the machine. So it's this spiral that says, well, you haven't got the water, so you can't have the machine, so people are dying. Now it's starting to affect the non-Indigenous community as well. So what we're trying to do at the moment is trying to hook up Laurie Costa and Phil Guy from down in GDS with the mayor of Tennant Creek and say, look, why don't we just stick one on the back of the truck and see what we can do? I mean, I know it's going to cost a few $1,000, but so what? Just who cares? Let's just go out and give it a shot. And the guys at GDS here in South Nowra, they're going to do just that. Another person we met on the way around was a bloke called Graham in Western Australia. He's the king of Mackerel Island and Onslow. He basically built the resort of Onslow. And he was interested in Space Trip too, and he read this pamphlet that I just had on the table, cover to cover, and he said, what's that all about? And I said, well, it's desalination, demineralisation, using micronic filtration and reverse osmosis to make fresh water. And he was really interested, and I thought, oh, this guy wants it for his holiday resorts. And he said, no, I'm a farmer. This is the bloke who has the patent for the machine that makes circular bales of hay and then wraps them in plastic. You see it on the roadside anywhere in Australia. Well, he's got the patent for that, and he invented it. So he's quite heavily into agriculture. And here's an interesting thing which I had no idea about. Some of the best fertilisers, pesticides, herbicides in the world are made in this country. But we can't use them because the water's not pure enough to use them. And so you can't mix them in the levels that you need, which is acceptable to the chemical, and then load it into an aeroplane or a helicopter to spray it. So most of that stuff goes offshore, and we end up using the lesser quality stuff which you can use with harsher water, but you end up using more water, more pesticides, more chemicals than you need to, all because you haven't got the right quality of water to use it. So Graham over there said, hey, can this thing desalinate as well? I said, well, yeah, it's got an RO plant. That's how submarines make their water at sea. And so we spoke to him on Tuesday, because the logic there is if we can get a couple of these things strapped up where his aircraft park and load up with chemicals and stuff, you can use less water, less chemicals, so it means they can carry more fuel, do more paddock area with more efficiency and more effective treatments. So just on that little Navex in a 50-something-year-old bug smasher, you start seeing all of the levels of resilience that we don't have in this country. And regional and rural Australia is a serious poor cousin. Serious poor cousin. King Tim up at Daly Waters is worth looking at. There we were in Daly Waters, right in the main street of Daly Waters, and now on the right is an old Navy sea venom. I thought, what's that doing here? Walked over to it, and on the side of the sea venom, the observer's name painted on that nose cone in Daly Waters in the middle of Australia was Lofty Kimpton, Sub-Lieutenant Kimpton, who was the CO of 817 when I arrived here in Narra as a youth. But how it got there, I'm not sure. I knew Lofty's never left something to be desired, but I don't think it was that bad. But, sorry, mate. So then we carried on to Argyle, Lake Argyle, and the Ord River scheme. Had a fantastic tour around that. And just flying over the Argyle Dam, 25 times the size of Sydney Harbour. More fresh water flows out of that dam in a day than the rest of Australia uses in a month. Amazing. And you sit there and say, okay, so why don't we build some pipes? Neither across here. Down here, down here, and down here. Start repopulating stuff. Oh, well, you've got to cross the borders and all this bureaucracy starts falling on top of you again. You think, one day our grandkids are going to say, our grandparents weren't real bright. There's so many solutions just sitting here staring us in the face, and we spend a lot of money on a lot of stuff, so maybe we should start thinking about that very carefully. Starting to sound a bit like a socialist. Anyway, the other thing which was really interesting about the whole trip was everywhere we went there was a Royal Flying Doctor Service base. And just walking through their various bases as how they do things in their part of the world, because that's the other thing, all these bases are tuned to their customer. And it's just fabulous. It's just a really inspiring thing to watch. And you think, and you do all this on volunteer money, effectively. And the government throws in a little bit through tax deduction and that sort of thing, but it's mostly, what they raise, they spend and they do what they have to do. Pretty amazing stuff. And as I keep saying to folks in the Shoalhaven, I know we haven't got an RFDS base or need here. Almost everyone in the Shoalhaven is going to eventually travel somewhere where there is only RFDS coverage. That's why we need to keep them alive. And the next race in 28 is the centenary of Doc Flynn, so we'll see how I'm feeling by then. And I haven't mentioned it to my bottom yet. So let's just have a look at the race itself. So that's what a gate out looks like. It's a mast. And then we went from the gate, and the sort of blue dots you see there are the course we actually flew. This is a departure sequence form you get every night. Sorry, man. That's a basic flight planning document we'd have in the aircraft on our phones. There's the airplane just tooled up and ready to go. And this one here is really just to show. There's the gate there. You see it in a moment. It was just a little dam, but you only saw it sort of in the last 3 or 4 miles. Or it could have been an abandoned well. And the abandoned well, for example, looks like that. See the 2 rings? Now that's highly magnified when you're looking at it from 1,500 feet, 7 or 8 miles out. That's a race form, which we fill every day. Morning brief at 8 o'clock. There's the mayor of Tennant Creek, Mayor Sid. Lots of things that look like cones on the side of the runways up there. Salt pan, again, completely different texture. Road trains. I didn't want to take this looking at it going along our track because it was beating us. It was fast. William, that's Daly Waters, the digs of Daly Waters, that's the main street. Some of you have probably been there. There's the Navy venom on the street. And there's Lockie's name on the side of it. That's even the tail look of this machine. I don't know how they got it there, but it's all there. That's King Tim. That's his horse. On the right. And again, this just included a couple of the forms to show that this is a daily routine. This is the Ted's shed up in Daly Waters. If you've ever been there, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's just the most extraordinary museum. It must be worth millions. Cars and motorbikes. There's Kenny the kite. And this is interesting. When we got into Catherine, we had an old day failure. We lost all electrics about 40 miles out. So we couldn't talk to anybody, couldn't use the intercom. Fuel gauges both got to zero. Fuel debit meter went to zero because the alternator had failed. But we got out of that. This is a young fella called Oliver. His wife's partner is Fleet Helicopters. He just happened to be flying mustering helicopters up in Catherine. And that was after a day without a radio and having to get into Raft Timber with no comms. This is the Catherine Gorge. Most of you have probably been there, I'd say. There's the aircraft with no propeller, no alternator, no belt. And can you believe these guys had it ready for us within 12 hours? While we were out swatting around the Catherine Gorge, they were putting our aeroplane back together and there it is ready to go for the next day. Such good service, and I was expecting a bill which I couldn't imagine, but I mean all of that, new alternator, new belt, all that work, testing it, getting it ready for me to go. I get an email with a $3,000 invoice on it, including a new alternator. I thought, geez, I can't do that with a car. But everything out of the Outback is just really, really supportive, and the very next day that bloke was actually retiring. He just sold his whole company to Heli West. And he literally dropped everything the day before his retirement for 40 years in the business to help us out. There's like Argyle. It is enormous. And again, there's great big cataracts of green. That's at Kununurra Airfield. And the fruit and vegetables up there are extraordinary. They're just the most beautiful quality. It's Kenny the kite. We had an auction up there at Kununurra. That's the bloke that did the work on the aeroplane. And the very next day, there he is at the Kununurra Cup. I said, hey, is my aeroplane all right? He goes, yeah, it's okay. And that was fun. Just meeting these folks, just sitting there with four complete strangers, and my phone started to buzz, and as I was talking to them, they threw $250 into the fundraiser. Then from Lake Argyle, we went on a couple of tours of the Ord River, and just seeing how amazing that whole operation is. And this is all freshwater, so it's all beautiful wildlife and landscapes. Spectacular. And you'd think, in the hottest part of Australia, lots and lots of flying foxes. There's a little rock wallaby right up there in the distance. Here's his mate, same place. Pelicans, all sorts of wildlife and bird life up there. This was afternoon tea on the river. And I'm not sure why we went ashore there, because not far from here, there's one. See the croc? I know they're only fresh water, but still. There's another one. But you just can't help but be captivated by just the reflections of everything, and the stillness and it's just this beautiful, beautiful temperature and climate at that time of year. There's the actual dam wall. There's no concrete or anything in it. It's all stacked gravel, and it holds back all that water. That's about day 12, we're still talking. And the sunsets, that hasn't been touched up, that photo, nor is the next two. That's the colour. It's just the whole sky just lights up like fire, and then you wait for 10 minutes after the sun's gone, and it's even deeper if that's possible. Wolf Creek crater, it's actually a meteorite crater. And just these extraordinary stations punctuating the whole countryside with their own enormous strips and just incredibly fully self-contained operations of agriculture. And this was all part and parcel of the race. We were flying over these places. There's Kenny at Broome. We were flying over these places, just literally map the ground, stopwatch, Jefferson computer, what do we need to alter? We didn't do too badly. There was a costume night in Broome. Full moon, or nearly. And sunset at Broome on Caney Beach. And then that night at a place called Papa Fuego with some fellow competitors. And that's waiting at Broome to depart. While on the camera. And then off we went out of Broome and started tracking towards Port Hedland. And you start seeing the top ends of just the most extraordinary colour in the sea. It's just, you know, you can't replicate it. And airfields everywhere. But look at that water. I haven't touched that photo. That's the colour of the Barents Sea. And there's the Indian Ocean right there. That's RFGS headquarters stop in Port Hedland. And the crew came out to give us morning tea, and they came inside and sit in the air-conditioned comfort. That's the railway exchange at Port Hedland for the grain and other bits. But as you can see, the salt, it's just everywhere, but it's just all so different. So that's salt right on the edge of the sea, and then really incredible greenwoods, which are clearly getting lots of fresh water. And this is coming into Onslow, and there's the airfield there. It's Kenny at Onslow. We took a whole bunch of school kids around the machines when we were there, and that was a fantastic day too. Kids just loved it. Man, they asked some fantastic questions. And we had a lovely reception on the water at Anzac Park, and the mayor spoke beautifully, and they made us feel so welcome. There was a food truck with their hand, airstream. A couple of free opposite water. I took their picture because they're quite few and far between. That's all my wife has said that. And that's literally just tracking now further south from Broome, Port Hedland into Exmouth, and this is Exmouth with Kenny the Kite. That's where we park the aeroplanes overnight. And there we also had the privilege of going to dinner with Amanda Kalis, whose family, of course, started up there with the Kalis brothers and the fishing issues there. And they had us in their home, a whole lot of us. Big party on the outside with a band and a barbecue. It was fantastic. This is Harold E. Holt, Northwest Cape. So there's the satellite tracking station. Those masts you're about to see are the actual panels of the very low frequency transmitters. Huge hexagonal shaped panels of wire that can communicate to submarines using very low frequency transmissions out to sea. Submerged submarines. We went out to Exmouth Gulf, and that's some of the sights through the glass bottom boat. Quite a lot of bleaching going on. There's a lot of water temperature rise there for all sorts of reasons. But we still saw 3 types of turtle. Our tour guide at one point when we were out there, she was there scraping the bottom of the boat to clean the glass for us. And she blew bubbles, and it was a great effect. Porpoises, humpback porpoises. sorry, humpback dolphins. And yeah, the sea life up there is just abundant. It just comes up and it's not frightened of humans. Lots of turtles. And again, it doesn't actually capture it. But there's the masts again. You can't probably see them very well. And that was the day of the grand final at AFL grand final. We were in the Potshot Inn at Exmouth. There's the big prawn. Last time I went to Exmouth, there was barely anything there, and the Americans were still there with the Harrowley Hull Station. Now it's about 30 of these man-made canals, incredible accommodation and homes, very expensive, and about 20 or 30 eateries, hotels, really nice shopping centres. I just can't get over how much Exmouth has grown. This is the Exmouth Gorge on the way out towards, on our way to Carnarvon, and that was Race End. But that's the Ningaloo Reef, and we pretty well flew parallel to it all the way down the coast until we got to Carnarvon. And that's what it looks like. Australia, Indian Ocean, and then this amazing strip of inside a barrier of coral. And the colour of the water, I haven't enhanced these photos at all, I haven't put through Photoshop or anything. That's just the colour. So there's a little later seconds, that's leaving Exmouth. There's Kenny at the end of the race. And there on the bus, thumbs up. Now all we're going to do is get it home. Carnarvon's waterfront's amazing. There's a sea wall, and on that sea wall is a plaque to every man lost on HMAS Sydney. 645 plaques. I'll show you that in a moment. Bruno took this photo appeared out of nowhere. It's a photo of me back in the 80s, and I don't know where they got it, but it appeared on the website. Someone in the race has done some searching. The Space Museum at Carnarvon is really worth a visit if you've not been there, to see exactly what part Australia played in Apollo, Mercury, Gemini and Skylab. It's really well presented, and I think it's actually on a par, if not better. Fellow competitor, Camille, we were in a simulator of the Apollo 11 capsule, which was actually a lot bigger than Charlie's. And there's the seawall. See the plaques? One to every sailor lost along the whole wall. I went there in the sunset and I had to go back the next morning. It was just too much. It's hard to get your mind around that many people losing their lives serving in a ship. That was the final night. These are the fundraising folks from RFTS headquarters. We've got our medals. We were the fourth fundraiser on the leaderboard. So of all the competitors, we were the fourth highest fundraisers. Believe it or not, this is a memorial to the Cormorant, which did the sinking of the Sydney. There's the Sydney Memorial, and there's the Cormorant Memorial just behind it. So we are very much a forgiving nation. There's a fellow I haven't seen for 35 years. He's an ex-Navy guy, Nick Edwards. He was having an egg and bacon roll as well. And that was Carnarvon in the original old egg terminal. And now we're heading home. So, getting home bit, pretty simple really. We flew down from Carnarvon, did 2 legs, one to Geraldton, refuelled Geraldton to Jandakot. And at that stage, Sandy had flown over from Nowra to be in Fremantle to stay with see our grandkids. So she'd been there for 4 or 5 days, and then I arrived with Lyle about halfway through that stay. We had 3 nights in Freo together with the kids, and then Lyle and I did the planning and started heading back across the country. Getting home was, as I say, was quite a challenge because we were trying to beat a couple of serious cold fronts. We did not want to get stuck in front of and behind those because, as we found out later, as some of our fellow racers did, they waited and dallied and did what they wanted to do, but it cost them about a week or 10 days to get back. to this side of the country. So we said, okay, we had a little meeting and said, well, I know we've had some long days, but if we are happy to tolerate 3 7-hour days in a row, on Friday we can go from Jandakot, Esperance for fuel, forest, overnight forest, population 2, and when we were there it became population 4. And then from forest overnight there, across to Ceduna for fuel, Port Augusta overnight and fuel, across to Hay for fuel, into Nowra. So we left it Friday morning and got back into Nowra on Sunday night at about 3 o'clock. Sunday afternoon at about 3 o'clock. And that was pretty well it for that. But the scenery coming across that part of the country was, again, totally different. You'll see some photos I'm about to show you of what looks like a 1,000 bomber raid in Berlin, because it's just these millions of holes of salt. And it's almost like someone's gone around and dug a hole in sequence and in rows. And they went for miles. Don't know how they formed, don't know why they're there. I'd love to do a bit more research to have some answers. But it was really quite extraordinary. The Great Australian Bight and the cliffs were spectacular, as was the Head of Bight. And then really just coming back across here from Port Augusta by the Hay Plains, that had its own special sceneries as well. But what you'll see in the last section, and this is the last little slides, I promise, then we'll wrap it up because it's far too long already. But on the last set of slides, what you'll see is pretty well the departure out of Carnarvon all the way around to back to Nowra. Okay, so let's go for last block. Okay, so here we go. We've now left Carnarvon, and this is Shark Bay. Now there is something here I want to stop and show you. It's an extraordinary piece of Australia, and this is all in the middle of the bay, these patterns of sand just underneath the surface. But when we were flying over it, there was a very, very strong land breeze. That's all submerged. Here we go. So, you see those lines? I did 40 years in the Navy, and I relied on wind lanes on the water to tell me where the wind was coming from, so we knew which way to hover in as we were doing things like lowering sonar balls or picking people up. But that's Shark Bay with a land breeze. So the land is starting to warm up, and it's sucking air in from the sea over the land and up. These are the wind lanes. The wind was that strong that across the whole of the Shark Bay to the south end, which is a large bit of water, these are the wind lanes. That was the patterns the wind was making on the surface on its way to the shore. And I'd never seen anything like it. And that doesn't capture it, because I just looked at Lyle, who was ex-Navy and ex-Sea Kings. I said, that's something you don't see every day, so I've never seen it before in my life. It was amazing. There they are there, across so much more area. As I said, lots and lots of airfields all over the place. Now we're starting to see the Gascoyne River Gorge. Starting to get back into civilization now, north of Geraldton. Starting to see lots of agriculture and farming again, coastal development. Heading towards Perth. That's Hillary's boat harbour in the northern suburbs of Perth. That's the Mayor of Fremantle. She was there to meet us. One of the fellows we were competing with. And then this is literally out of Fremantle now. And we're now on our way towards Esperance, tracking to forest. As you can see, lots and lots of agriculture, strip farming, some really various, varying methods of just preserving water. Salt, different colour, down on the south coast. Here we go. This is the start of this what looks like a bombardment. Look at all. Look at that. And it went for miles, not just a couple hundred yards. It just went for miles. Rabbit-proof fence. Getting back into colder weather, you can see we're getting a bit more rugged up. And this is a forest in the hangar, sunset. And as I say, population 2. Donna and Mark, and she cooks for everybody that pulls in and stops and stays in these things, which are the old Bureau of Married Quarters. And there's forest dining, that's what we had for dinner, and there was all the forest inhabitants right there. The sky was amazing, the night sky. You can't see very well in this, but... And then I managed to put some graffiti on the loo wall, as did all of my previous subordinates, as I can see lots of Fly Navy stickers on there, and I didn't put them there. But, so clearly the boys have been active when they were on their way. Boys and girls. I took this photo because it's the first time I actually saw 3,500 feet steady. There's the Great Australian Bight and the cliffs. That's coming towards the head of Bight. And there's the head of Bight. Then after we'd left that, next stop was Port Augusta for fuel and a night stop. Lots and lots of salt works all the way to Port Augusta. And again, like I say, I haven't touched any of these photos up. This is just all the colour that the phone caught. And to the human eye, they were much, much more vivid and vibrant than that. There's an example of 71 litres of fuel, $213. This is Port Augusta for the night. Mark Williams, some of you might recognise him, head of RFS here during the big fires. Bumped into him in a car park in a motel in Port Augusta. Then out of Port Augusta, on our way to Hay. Got a little bit higher for this so we get a bit of tailwind. And it's very different scenery. That's Hay, very last stop before Nowra. We've refueled and now we're crossing the Hay Plains. And again, different agricultural techniques again, and you can just see how imaginative farming is in Australia when you see over a stretch of time or distance what people are actually putting together. That should look familiar, that's the Shoalhaven Gorge. Nearly home. There's Nowra. Little diversion over the top of North Nowra, a couple of words to say hi to the girl, and there we are back in Albatross. Now that's an important photo, just remember this one. That's at the pub that night with Sandy for a beer. And that was our adventure. These are just a couple of radio interviews on the way back, but the reason that photo, I said just remember this, when we landed and we were taking a picture of with us with the aircraft, we had our arm on the prop spinner. And I thought, what's wrong with the propeller? Because it should actually be up here. I stood back and I thought, this is amazing timing. The nose wheel shock absorber had collapsed. So we landed on the very last landing, and I've got a video on it. I can prove to you it was a very smooth landing. We came down, taxied into the hangar, pulled it up, shut it down, gave ourselves a bit of a fist pump on the pump on the back. And what we didn't notice is as we were doing that, it was just slowly sagging and down again. And I said to Marty Mikos, the mechanic, I said, "Oh geez mate, the bloody nose wheel struts in need of some help." And he said, "What do you expect? It's a gentle old lady, she's just flown her ass off for you, she's taking a bow." So that was that. But if you just bear with me for just a moment, we'll have some questions. But what I do want to do is just so this is the last circuit. There's now an airfield. Just turning base now. And the little machine just didn't miss a beat.
Yes.
And I'm going to put this on my in my obituary as well. You know, you could land an aeroplane. Not bad for a smelly old pilot. A bit about the machine. It's a 1968 Piper Cherokee. It came into the country, CAF, Civil Aviation Flight Academy. It was bought by DCA back in the 60s as their flying training machine and chicken training machine in Melbourne. And it's been here at Barra for 30 years. But there's runway 26, you can see it there. It's right behind the Academy Bay, which is where it should be. But there it is, it's runway 26. And the thing I really want you to pay attention to is the very gentle 2 squeaks. I'm very proud of it.
Just resting now. Safe and sound. Plane's just resting now.
Yeah.
Safe and sound. Back to the bomb.
So she very politely waited till we stopped before the nose wheel collapsed. Which was and this is just a little bit. This is the Cadney Homestead takeoff when we realised we couldn't get fuel, and that was a serious grab and strip. Really quite concerned about the propeller kicking up gravel and putting some dents in it, which happened, which is why we do everything on the roll. But Cadney Homestead is a very large homestead with a petrol station.
With no fuel.
But no fuel.
Did you ever let us know?
Yeah, we did. Oh, good question. The ones behind us, we got them on the radio and say, go to Cuba now, nothing at Cadney. So we managed to divert them, and that was 7 aircraft. But by the time they got to Ayers Rock, or Uluru that night, Ayers Rock Airfield, they were just shattered. Because the afternoon really heats up this dirt, and it's just very wild ride. Right, yeah, that's pretty well about it. Oh no. It was polite.
Why did you pick an older aeroplane?
It's younger than me. I just like the old stuff. I kind of like this sort of stuff. Yeah, some of the machines on that race were extraordinary. Some of the 30-something-year-old blokes and a couple of girls as well, who had machines that were $250,000 a piece. And I'm thinking, geez, how do you do that? But But no, I've known this machine for ages, forever. I'm the president of the Aero Club. It's been with the Aero Club as long as I've been the president, and for 23 years before that. And it just came up on the market for all sorts of reasons. Phil Balding, who some of you might know, is a local accountant. He was very badly injured by a ram that was making eyes at one of his ewes, but didn't have any consideration for the fact that Phil was standing between the ewe and him. And he broke some serious bones and things, so he couldn't get up on the wing anymore. And he just replaced the prop and the engine, and it was just a really good, it was a really beautifully prepared aircraft. And I've been looking for about 2 years, and this one, I thought, well, it's not got everything I want, but it's...
So you bought the aeroplane
Yeah.
first.
Yeah.
And it was flying then, in spite of the...
Oh yeah, no, that was just an ongoing repair. But no, it's been flying, it's got about 8,000 hours. And you don't measure an aircraft stage in years, you measure it in flying hours. And it's been beautifully maintained and kept.
Yeah.
And I knew it was honest. I saw some aircraft in the business of trying to buy one where I thought, wow, this is really interesting. It's supposed to have been through all these things, but it doesn't look like it has. And then you say, well, why does it look so new if none of it's recorded? So there's a lot of, different approaches to maintaining aircraft. This one I knew had been maintained beautifully by Navy folks and ex-Navy folks. So I didn't have to go too far from home to find the good thing. But I love it. And it doesn't look old. I mean, it looks, like I say, it's younger than me. Hi.
Can I take you back to the survival kit and ask where you got the $20 radio, please?
Oh, okay. Almost everything on this. Are any of you internet shoppers on Temu? If you just put the word survival or emergency gear in Temu, almost all of this stuff came from there. So a solar tent, solar blankets, compass and whistle, mosquito nets. Almost all of it came in one box. Silent sticks, chemical sticks, break them in half and shake. We've got light for a long time.
You know, when I shop with Chinese Temu, Anaconda have got a earplug for $300 and something.
Oh, have they?
Yeah, I just bought one.
I bought those from Tamworth, believe it or not, from ARB. They were the cheapest online. In fact, they were $294 or something like that for both of them. But I reckon every family ought to have one. Stick it in the car. And now I'm just thinking about the whole bushfire season. I'm thinking, well, this is not a bad thing to perhaps just tart up a bit and use it for that as well.
Can I just ask, the point-to-point navigation path that
Yes.
you had, was that specifically for your aircraft or
All of us.
the same?
Yeah.
Everybody had the same?
Same gates. So when you saw the departure order,
And who decided that?
the guy called Warbo, who I met all those years ago, he was the race manager for this one. He won the last one, and he was the manager for this one. Yeah. But it's a good question, because in my military flying, we wouldn't concentrate quite so much on the getting out. We'd be more interested in the points of convergence and having good separation there.
Yeah, that's what I wondered.
Yeah, it didn't happen on this one. So, but we weren't there to criticise, we were there to participate in the rules as best we could. But I have written a nice note afterwards saying, hey, you ought to consider this and this, because it makes the race a bit fairer, because there's no way I could compete using this against that.
Yeah.
And so, although competition wasn't front of mind for me and Lila, it was about making as much money as we could, because that's the idea of it. And we did all right, we came fourth. That was okay.
Can I just ask one more?
Yeah.
That Marin
Mari Man.
How do you spell it?
M-A-R-R-E-E. Mari Man. And it's on Mari Station, just south of Lake
Can you
Eyre.
tell me where that is on
It's right. So that's Lake Eyre. Lake Eyre North, Lake Eyre South. It's just there. No, it's just there.
the... I'll look it up on the...
Yes.
If it's got a great, it's got a great Google site. It's quite spooky when you're flying towards it. You think, oh, wow.
What about the outline is done? Is it to spell it permanent?
I don't know, because it was before GPS. It appeared before GPS. So someone got out there with a very, very good eye and said, okay, this will be his right leg, this will be his left leg.
Is it in soil or rock? Or
It's in gravel, and it's been graded. So someone's gone out there to do it, but no one knows who.
Excuse me, in the
Yes.
first aid kit thing, you bought something for $350 somewhere in Nowra, which is a tracking thing or something.
You mean the EPIRBs? The emergency locator beacon. Just alert. EPIRB stands for Emergency Personal Beacon. Personal.
There's another one before that.
The radio.
This one?
No, that's
No?
so that's the locator beacon. If you just go to the 4-wheel drive shop, ARB down here in South Nowra, they also have them. The emergency locator beacon, or an EPIRB, personal locator beacon. Yeah. From the 4-wheel drive shop down in South Nowra, or even J-Car will have them. They're quite readily accessible. And where did you say your colleague? She said somewhere. I think she mentioned they're available online.
Yes, you can.
But when you buy it and you get the instructions with it, you actually log it into a website at the Australian Maritime Safety Authority, and you put in all your details there, and whenever you discharge or activate it, AMSA goes straight to where you are, can triangulate you within a minute, and can inform your next of kin or whoever is on your form of where you are.
Why would you go with that one?
Oh, exactly.
That's right, exactly.
So I've got two of those here, stuck one in Lola's pocket and one in mine.
Common sense.
Any other questions?
Send 100 people out looking at you.
Well, I think you've kept everybody here today completely fascinated
Oh, thanks,
by your
mate.
story.
Thank you.
I've never seen an audience so quiet and just concentrated and listening. But thank you very much.
Great
It was
pleasure.
most enjoyable.
Thanks, mate. Thank you very much. I must say, I need to make a public apology for having forgotten to say this during the preparations, but I come with a message from Lyle Holt for you, Joan. Your very, very generous picnic bars were our lunch every day we were racing, and they survived until the second last day before getting home. We had one of those and a packet of savoury shapes for lunch when we couldn't actually stop for lunch, and that was every day we were racing. And I said to Lyle, I'm going to be seeing Joan, and he said, well, make sure you thank her for the picnic bars because they actually saved our skin. And I'm happy to say that I've put all the weight that I lost back on.
Show us who it is.
But it was very much appreciated. Thank you very much indeed, and they were with us the whole way around. Thanks very much, everybody. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you.